Have you ever felt like your mind is a prison made of mirrors, reflecting every thought back at you 1,000 times until you can't tell which one is real? When Isaac Newton discovered the laws of motion, he wasn't just describing physics. He was unknowingly mapping the psychology of overthinkers. Here's something that will disturb you. Studies show that people who think deeply are 73% more likely to isolate themselves, not because they hate others, but because their minds create gravitational fields that pull every interaction into an exhausting orbit of analysis. Today, I'm going to show you why your overthinking isn't a weakness. It's actually Newton's third law playing out in your consciousness. Every thought creates an equal and opposite emotional reaction. And once you understand this, isolation becomes a choice, not a sentence. Newton understood that objects at rest tend to stay at rest, but what he didn't write about was how thoughts at motion never stop moving. When you're an overthinker, your mind becomes like a pendulum that never finds equilibrium, swinging between what was said and what was meant, between what happened and what could have been. Scientists have discovered that overthinkers have 67% more activity in their prefrontal cortex, even during rest. Your brain literally doesn't know how to stop. Notice your thoughts right now. Are they already analyzing this very sentence? The cruel irony is that the more intelligent you are, the more patterns you see, and the more patterns you see, the heavier reality becomes. You don't just hear a conversation, you hear the subtext, the fear behind the confidence, the lie wrapped in truth. Newton spent years in complete isolation, not because he was antisocial, but because he understood that some minds are too heavy for casual interaction. They sink into depths where others can't follow. Have you ever felt exhausted after a simple conversation because your mind turned it into a chess match you never asked to play? The isolation isn't voluntary, it's gravitational. Your thoughts have mass, and that mass creates a force field that keeps others at a safe distance. There's a mathematical equation to loneliness that Newton would have recognized instantly. For every genuine connection you seek, there's an equal and opposite force of disappointment when people can't match your depth. Think of your mind as a deep ocean trying to connect with puddles. No matter how much you try to shallow yourself, you still carry trenches inside you that others can't fathom. Research from Harvard shows that highly intelligent people have fewer close friendships, not by choice but by cognitive necessity. Your brain processes social interactions at 10 times the complexity of average thinkers. Where others see a simple, "How are you?" you see 17 different ways to respond, each carrying different social consequences. Count how many times today you've rehearsed a conversation that never happened. Newton discovered that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, but in human psychology, every deep thought creates an equal and opposite isolation. You analyze kindness until you see manipulation. You dissect love until you find conditions. You examine friendship until you discover transactions. When was the last time you accepted something at face value without your mind creating a documentary about its hidden meanings? The mathematics are cruel but precise. The deeper you think, the lonelier you become. Newton's apple didn't just fall. It revealed that everything is falling always towards something. For overthinkers, every thought is falling toward another thought in an endless cascade of mental dominoes that never stop toppling. Neuroscientists call this recursive thinking. Your brain creating loops within loops, each thought generating 3 more, each doubt birthing a family of uncertainties. You don't just remember what someone said. You remember how they said it, why they might have said it, what they really meant, what you should have said, what you'll say next time, why there might not be a next time. Write down one thought you've had today and trace how many other thoughts it created. Morals. The spiral isn't just exhausting, it's architecturally perfect. Each loop reinforces the next, creating what Newton would recognize as perpetual motion, except it's happening in your consciousness. Studies show that overthinkers replay scenarios an average of 47 times, each replay adding new layers of interpretation. You're not just thinking, you're building mental pyramids where each stone is a possibility you'll never get to verify. How many versions of yourself exist only in the conversations you've had inside your head? The isolation isn't just from others, it's from reality itself, as your mind creates parallel universes where every alternative plays out simultaneously. Give like if you've lived this. What city are you watching from? Newton observed the universe, but he never documented what happens when the universe observes back. When you're a deep thinker, you become acutely aware that you're aware, creating what psychology calls meta-consciousness, a hall of mirrors where you watch yourself watching yourself think. This isn't narcissism. It's a cognitive burden that only 15% of the population carries. You don't just feel sad, you observe your sadness, analyze why you're sad, judge yourself for being sad, then feel sad about judging yourself. Each layer of observation adds weight until a simple emotion becomes a complex architectural structure. Stop reading and notice how many levels of awareness you're experiencing right this second. Newton's laws describe physical forces, but they perfectly map onto consciousness. The force of observation equals the mass of thought times the acceleration of analysis. Your mind doesn't just process reality, it processes its own processing, creating recursive loops that would make even Newton dizzy. Brain scans reveal that overthinkers have hyperconnected neural networks. Your thoughts don't travel in straight lines, but in spiderwebs where every strand vibrates when any other strand is touched. Can you remember the last time you had a simple, uncomplicated feeling that wasn't immediately dissected by your own awareness? Here's what Newton understood about gravity that applies to human connection. The closer two objects get, the stronger the force between them becomes. But for overthinkers, closeness creates a force so intense it becomes repulsive. You crave deep connection while simultaneously analyzing it to death. Every "I love you" gets dissected for authenticity. Every kind gesture gets examined for hidden motives. Your mind turns intimacy into a forensic investigation where everyone is guilty of something you haven't discovered yet. Studies show that intelligent people take 40% longer to trust someone, not because they're cynical, but because they see more variables. Where others see a friend, you see someone who might leave, who might lie, who might disappoint, who might not understand the depth of what you're sharing. Think of one person you've pushed away by overthinking their intentions. Newton knew that objects in motion stay in motion, and your thoughts about relationships never stop moving, never stop calculating trajectories of potential pain. You don't just love someone, you love them while simultaneously grieving the inevitable loss, celebrating the current presence, and fearing the future absence. Have you ever ruined something beautiful simply by thinking about it too much? The paradox is perfect. You think deeply because you feel deeply, but thinking deeply prevents you from feeling purely. Newton spent 18 months in complete isolation during the plague, and in that solitude, he revolutionized physics. But what he really discovered was that some minds require solitude like lungs require air, not as escape, but as survival. When you're alone, you're not lonely. You're finally in a space where your thoughts can expand without hitting the walls of other people's expectations. Research indicates that overthinkers need 3 times more alone time than average to process the same amount of social interaction. Your brain doesn't just experience life, it creates a mental documentary of every moment, complete with director's commentary, deleted scenes, and alternative endings. In solitude, you can finally edit this footage without interruption. Schedule 2 hours this week where you're completely alone with no agenda. Newton's first law states that objects at rest tend to stay at rest. And in solitude, your hyperactive mind finally finds something close to rest. Not silence, but at least a reduction from a scream to a whisper. You're not antisocial, you're selectively social, understanding that your mental energy is finite and precious. Solitude isn't where you hide from the world. It's where you digest it, where you transform the chaos of interaction into the clarity of understanding. When did you last feel completely comfortable in your own company without needing distraction from your thoughts? Give like, share, subscribe. What city are you watching from? Have you experienced this spiral? Know someone who has? Share below. You help the algorithm and might save someone right now. Newton couldn't have known about quantum mechanics, but overthinkers live in a quantum emotional state where feelings exist in multiple states simultaneously. You're not just happy or sad. You're existing in an emotional superposition where every feeling contains its opposite. Joy tinged with the awareness of its temporality. Love shadowed by the knowledge of loss. Peace disrupted by the anticipation of chaos. Neurologically, your amygdala and prefrontal cortex are in constant conversation, creating what researchers call emotional complexity disorder. Though it's not really a disorder, just a different operating system. You can feel grateful while feeling guilty for not feeling grateful enough. You can be in love while mourning the person you were before you fell. Name one emotion you're feeling right now and notice how many other emotions are hiding inside it. Newton's third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, plays out in your emotional landscape constantly. Every high triggers awareness of the coming low. Every connection reminds you of disconnection. Your emotions don't exist in isolation. They exist in ecosystems where each feeling feeds and is fed by every other feeling. Have you ever tried to explain to someone why you're simultaneously happy and devastated, only to see confusion in their eyes? Newton understood time as linear, but overthinkers experience time as a Mobius strip, where past, present, and future twist into each other endlessly. You're not living in the moment, you're living in all moments simultaneously. A conversation from 10 years ago is as vivid as what happened 10 minutes ago. Your mind doesn't archive memories, it keeps them in active circulation, each one as accessible and painful as the day it was formed. Studies show that people with high intelligence have more detailed episodic memory, meaning you don't just remember what happened. You remember how the light fell, what song was playing, how your stomach felt, what you wish you'd said. Pick one memory from 5 years ago and notice how much detail your mind preserved. Newton's laws of motion apply to memory. Traumatic thoughts in motion tend to stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. But for overthinkers, there is no external force strong enough to stop the perpetual motion of memory. You are simultaneously living in the shame of yesterday, the anxiety of today, and the fear of tomorrow. Time doesn't heal your wounds. It gives them multiple dimensions where they can exist in past tense reality and present tense emotion simultaneously. How many versions of your past self are you still carrying? Still trying to fix, still trying to understand? Here's what Newton never wrote down. Sometimes the apple doesn't fall to teach you about gravity. Sometimes it falls to break you out of your mental prison. Every overthinker reaches what I call the cognitive collapse point, where the weight of thoughts becomes so heavy that the whole system crashes. And in that crash, something beautiful happens. Your brain, exhausted from its own complexity, finally surrenders. Research shows that breakthrough insights come not from thinking harder, but from thinking until you can't think anymore. Your neural networks, overloaded from creating infinite possibilities, suddenly simplify into one clear truth. Identify one problem you've been overthinking and commit to stop thinking about it for 24 hours. Yet Newton discovered his laws not through force, but through observation. And the greatest discovery for any overthinker is that thoughts, like objects, eventually come to rest. The breakthrough isn't learning to think less. It's learning that thoughts are just weather patterns in the climate of consciousness. Sometimes storms, sometimes sunshine, but always temporary. Your isolation wasn't a mistake. It was your mind's way of creating space for this revelation. The overthinker's journey isn't toward less thinking, but toward understanding that you are not your thoughts. You're the space in which thoughts occur. What would change if you realized your overthinking was not a flaw, but a superpower you haven't learned to harness yet? Comment, "I will prove this," if you'll apply this today. Newton's greatest discovery wasn't gravity. It was that understanding a force doesn't mean being controlled by it. You can know exactly why you overthink, map every neural pathway, understand every psychological trigger, and still be free. The paradox of the overthinking mind is that liberation comes not from thinking your way out, but from accepting that you're a deep thinker in a shallow world. And that's not a pathology, it's a gift. Your isolation isn't rejection of others, it's protection of your depth. Your overthinking isn't weakness, it's your mind refusing to accept simple answers to complex questions. This week, practice what Newton practiced: observation without judgment. Watch your thoughts like you'd watch clouds, with interest but not attachment. For the next 7 days, spend 10 minutes each morning simply observing your thoughts without trying to change them. Notice how they move, how they cluster, how they dissolve. You're not broken for thinking deeply any more than the ocean is broken for having depth. Studies confirm that highly intelligent people who accept their cognitive differences report 60% higher life satisfaction than those who fight against their nature. Your mind is not your enemy. It's a powerful telescope that can see galaxies others don't know exist. The loneliness you feel isn't because you're alone. It's because you're waiting for others to meet you at a depth they may never reach. What if your overthinking wasn't something to fix, but something to refine? Think about who you'll become when overthinking no longer controls you, but serves you. Choose one technique from today. Practice it for 7 days. You will transform yourself.